Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Approaching the Pros, a college football production focused on different college players from before they ever take a snap in college all the way through their journeys up until one day they hope to approach the pros. I'm your host, Andrew Woodruff. You can find me on Twitter just by searching at Debbie Scout. Welcome back. Since the last two episodes really focused on the running backs with my year one zero theory focused on running backs and my high school running back model, I figured it was only right that I wanted to go in and provide just one more episode on an unknown star potentially in the making. So imagine my surprise being in so much on this kid over the summer to find out that no one else really seems like they ever believe in this kid. That's where I'm at right now. And I kept going through my high school model and just looking, seeing is there something I'm missing. But again, everything points to where this kid is just ranked so much higher. In fact, like no one else has him ranked or even selected in the ADP of the most in-depth data set around when it comes to college fantasy. And so let's introduce him. This is Aneyas Williams, freshman running back going to Notre Dame. I believe this kid is Notre Dame's next unknown star. So let's talk about it. First off, let's break it down. We've got this graphic right here, just kind of helping everybody see. This is the main four players when it comes to Notre Dame's backfield: Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Keegan Young, and Aneyas Williams. If we go back and we look at how these kids are ranked positionally and overall and at ADP, we see that there's a drastic difference. Jeremiah Love is the one getting the most respect out of the community with an overall rank of 134. C2C or a Debbie rank in the 40s to up to 50s, and an average ADP based off C2C data of around 151. Okay, so again, we're talking about a kid getting a little bit of respect there. Jadarian Price definitely falls much further, had an overall rank of 242. C2C Debbie ranks have them late 78 all the way to 131 when it comes to Debbie potential. So again, just showing they really don't believe in the kid long term, but there might be something there for the C2C college production base with an average ADP of 252. Keegan Young, who I'm sure this data has even updated since I last pulled it up, has an overall rank of 264 out of all college players, but notice he has a C2C rank of RB 83 and a Debbie rank of RB 44. This is the kid that everybody keeps believing can take over the offense at some point. Now, we don't know when, and so I think that's why we see, again, this average ADP still in the 260s. Wouldn't be surprised right now if you were to pull up the newest data sets. He might be slightly ahead of Jadarian Price. Aneyas Williams, on the other hand, is not ranked at all. It doesn't matter if it's the overall rank, doesn't matter if it's the C2C rank, doesn't matter if it's Debbie rank. And the fact that their average ADP goes out to 595 and he's past that shows that no one's even really drafting this kid except for me, seems like, this offseason. I believe that's a mistake. Well, let's go ahead and let's look at the next part. So, starting back again, since this kid is a freshman, it's still relevant in seeing what type of talent this kid has. So, as I already said, Aneyas Williams is going to be a true freshman running back this fall at Notre Dame and really has great potential to show people more about who he is. So, if we were to go back to the composite ranks, look at 247 Sports or something like that, he's sitting there RB 19 or so. If you look at just 24/7's ranks, he's RB 23. C2C did have him in the ranks for recruiting ranks at RB 17. But again, he's just not getting any love. And I think that's crazy if we look at all these offers that are sitting there showing it up. These are some big time programs. Now, of course, Cal, Boston College, yeah, well, no one's getting super hyped about that, but it should start getting people's attention that we're talking about teams like Ohio State, Mizzou, Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, Notre Dame himself, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida with Napier has a decent track record when it comes to running backs. Ole Miss, Penn State, Michigan State. I mean, just again, I didn't name all these offers right here, but we're talking about a kid with 20 offers, and they're just not nobodies. That's interest that's being garnered by many programs with some rich positional history. So it really speaks volumes that Notre Dame themselves were able to keep the kid from Mizzou committed. Again, my high school model has Aneyas Williams as the RB, tied for the RB4 in the class with one other freshman. And that's what really truly opened up my eyes to what secret talent we might be missing. And so again, as a reminder, my high school model really goes in and analyzes the production of these recruits in their final 2 years and uses that along with the physical build archetypes I talked about. Remember, are they a feature back? Are they a role player? Are they a satellite player? And then again, I use a film grade through what the recruit rankings tell us. And I put those three things together, and it really comes out with these outputs, what we might can expect from players before they ever take a college snap. So let's tie this in. So I already talked about recruits. Let's look a little bit further. If we want to just focus on what Notre Dame has brought in the past, I think that's a great place to start because again, this is the school that convinced them to come in. And notice again, Aneyas Williams is the only one out of all these Notre Dame running backs going back to 2012 that even hit 90%. He sits up here at the top of all these Notre Dame recruits, having the feature archetype that I talk about when it comes to size for running backs, the model percentile putting him almost in that top group. The next highest two happens to be Audric Estime and Kyron Williams. Audric Estime just had a great season this year. Ended up going in day 3 to the Broncos, and then Kyron Williams, I believe, was day 3, round 5, I believe, to the Rams, and again, has had a great second year in the NFL too. Those were the next two highest guys at 86%. Keidron Young, the one who everybody's hyping up, my model has all the way down to 76%. That's a much, much bigger gap than what everybody has been talking about this offseason. And Keidron Young's the only one getting talked about. Aneyas Williams has not been talked about yet. If they're going to talk about the backfield, then they'll try and bring up Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love. Those two upperclassmen, I think people need to start being very aware that their production, both from college and what my high school model is showing, there is reason for concern. Neither of those two dudes cleared 60%. They've fallen in closer with guys like Chris Tyree, Logan Diggs, Tony Jones, Dexter Williams. Just not appealing options. And even the running back Payne, who tore his ACL this spring, everybody was hyping him up. And he's just, again, none of these dudes really favor that upper potential like Aneyas Williams does. And, personally, I think that's not a bad place to be when the other two under him by a little margin have been some of the most successful running backs in the program's recent history. So I think, again, just looking at this, we need to first have a takeaway that it is okay to stash these freshmen over these veteran players. While, of course, we know seniority is a thing, and these coaches are going to reward that, that's only going to go so far when you got unproven players who combine last year for, let's say, 118 rushes, 657 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. Let's not get started about the receiving game. Together, they only had 13 catches, 142 receiving yards, and another 2 touchdowns. That's the first season play for both of them, right? I know one of them had an injury. The other one was a freshman last year. But that's not enough to really prove that either of them deserve to be the long-term starter moving forward. And as we say, talent always rises to the top, so let's be aware of that risk too. So I think, again, if you were to sit there and break it down, this model just shows Aneyas was better than all these other guys when it came to touchdowns, receptions, all the yard metrics, the fantasy metrics on a per-game basis from my high school model. And if you combine that when it came to what the recruits were saying and the recruiting services were saying, it just stands out, hey, this might be a dude that we need to take a little bit more seriously. And so, again, let's talk about what Aneyas Williams did just this last 2 years in high school. I think that really, really just drives home the point here. In 22 games, he had 311 carries, 2,777 rushing yards, 47 rushing touchdowns. Here's the kicker. 125 receptions, 1,240 receiving yards, and another 33 receiving touchdowns. Who did it all? Like, he was phenomenal. And so let's look at that a little bit differently here. So, since this is more for, a college football fantasy production with approaching the pros, I think it's important that we sit there and we start breaking these things into points per game, both on the rushing aspect and since we like our running backs to be versatile, on the receiving aspect. Aneyas Williams up here at the top, again, shocking, is just heads and shoulders above the rest when it comes to multiple areas. And so let's take the rushing fantasy points per game first. Aneyas Williams had 25.4. Audric Estime, of course, was the leader in this group at 29.3, the best rushing total, but very respectable considering that that puts Aneyas second, slightly ahead of Keidron Young, and just a little bit more ahead of Kyron Williams and Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love and the rest of the dudes. The receiving part of his game, which is what's got me so excited, is just so much better. Kyron Williams is the second best out of this group at 14.9 receiving fantasy points per game. Dude was very involved himself. We saw that when it came to the college level for sure. Aneyas is 20.3. 14.9 to 20.3. We're talking about a huge jump. Aneyas has so much potential. Like the next highest guy, we have to sit there and go look. Jadarian Price is at 5.5. That's the next highest after those two. Audric Estime was at 3.9. We saw how much he was involved. So, I mean, we're talking about the potential is so much higher for Aneyas Williams in a brand new system that could easily give him the workload when it comes to the receiving game. And so it's just insane when we start thinking about that. How about we look at it another way? So let me flip the slide. Let's go look at the next one. Out of my model, which for the high school running back model has 588 running backs right now, that number will probably go up very soon. He was one of only 11 running backs that finished with 45 points or more per game. This model's big, and he was already way up there when it came to overall production. Well, if I sit there and focus just on the receiving side, because like I said, we like our running backs who can catch the ball and be very involved in that aspect of the game. He's one of only 29 running backs with more than 10 or more receiving points per game. Starting to see some very small groups. Well, if I talk about that model score, which is so relevant, and I showed how it could very much be a deciding factor in the last episode, he's one of only 39 running backs with a 90% or better score in that model. If we look at receptions per game, it's not surprising that Aneyas Williams was first among the running backs in receptions per game. He was one of 17 running backs. He was 10th, if anyone's wondering, with 50 or more receiving yards per game. He was tied 211th among running backs with 25.4 rushing points per game, right? It's not just about the receiving part. We know our running backs can be good runners as well. This places in the top 36%. Not a bad spot to be at all when we're talking about a dual threat running back. If we want to look at it, those 20.3 receiving points per game that I talked about puts him first out of all 588 running backs in receiving points per game. Now, there is an asterisk there. I do want to clarify this in case anyone's listening instead of watching. That does exclude Mike Boone, CJ Donaldson, and Dwayne Washington. You can go look back at their recruit profiles on 24/7 Sports. None of them were listed as running backs. I believe Donaldson was a tight end. Mike Boone and Dwayne Washington were receivers. They were barely, and I do mean barely, ahead of Aneyas Williams, who was actually playing running back. I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind here. And so, really, I want to wrap it up with this last part right here. I think, well, actually, no. Let me talk about this real quick. Since we talk about receiving is so important, I already clarified that Aneyas was ahead of every other running back. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of these notable running backs that have the receiving skills that we like. Antonio Gibson. I went back and looked up his information. Was at 16.3 receiving fantasy points per game. Ashton Genty, who's everybody's RB1 in the 2025 class, it feels like, if you go check Twitter or X as it's now called, of course, at 15.7. 20.3, 15.7. We're already seeing the drop off here. Kyron Williams, already mentioned him, 14.9. Christian McCaffrey, not a bad name to bring up here, 14.7. Like it's insane when we look at that. And so again, let's go back and let me go back down to this other side. Let's play a game. I really want to get very selective about some of the metrics that are in my high school model. And let me show you which running backs we end up with. And so I'll be generous. Just have a high school weight listed of 195 pounds or more. Have at least 8 yards or more per carry in my model. Have 110 rushing yards per game or more. At least half a touchdown receiving wise per game. Have at least 5 or more receiving points per game, right? A very low bar, especially if we want to compare that to Aneyas at 20.3. And for fantasy points per game, for total, let's do 35 or more fantasy points per game. Out of 588 running backs, you can take a second, think about this. It's not going to leave us with many, right? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it gives you 6. They hit all 6 of these criteria. 4 of them, we already know. Darius Geis, all the potential in the world, can't help the off-field stuff. Christian McCaffrey, we see how that's played out. Saquon Barkley, we see how that's played out. Kyron Williams just had a big year. Everybody's got him, it seems like, in the top 8 when it comes to running backs moving forward. That leaves us with 2 running backs in the college level right now with the chance to join this very selective group. Now, this show isn't about Caden Fagan, the running back from Illinois, but I really, really think the community might be underrating his potential. And he is a big dude, but has potential to do everything that we got when it comes to a fantasy aspect and do it well. Aneyas Williams joins this group this year. Going into college, this is the select group that he gets to be part of. That's a very fantastic spot to be as a freshman who has yet to play it down, especially when that allows us fantasy football players to sit there and consider just how cheap a shot at this kid might be when it comes to his upside. And so I think that's very important because now we can take that, we can combine it with the fact that Keydron Young was limited this spring, and the buzz has already been mostly positive for the freshman since he decided to enroll early and has really been getting started to feel for this new offense that's under a new coordinator. So everybody's learning the same new offense, which, again, kind of helps also because his new system has passes more directed to running backs as well, which I've already highlighted in this video is the strength of Williams. Now, let's be nice. Let's say instead of me sitting there having it at 0.5 receiving touchdowns per game, because I know somebody's going to argue about different high school schemes. And again, production is production. I go back to the stud theory. The best guys learn how to get on the field and produce regardless of situation. But let's say I was sitting there and I would be nice and I lowered just the receiving touchdowns per game. Instead of half per game, we drop it to 0.4. That adds in another 4 names for us. Devin Neal, the running back from Kansas, who I think, again, is also underrated. Martell, freshman, who I currently don't know where he's going since he dropped out of Kansas, is in the portal. Stephen Carr, USC. Brees Hall. We do like Brees Hall. All my stuff went off. There's another one, Jerrion Ely from Ole Miss. Okay. Dude did have some value when it came to the Devy side, but of course we saw that never panned out in the NFL. Also, I think Ole Miss kind of overlisted his weight. He never was able to become a full-time workhorse. Now, again, I'll drop it one more time just for reference. Instead of saying a 0.4 receiving touchdowns per game. Let's just drop it to a quarter. So 0.25 receiving touchdowns per game. Take all those names I've already given you. So 6 plus 5, we got 11 right there. Let's also throw in now Darius Taylor, running back from Minnesota, who a lot of people think has potential. Well, this is a very good group to be in if that's the case. Alexander Madison, Travion Henderson, right? Running back right now at Ohio State, I think has potential to be the running back one of the 2025 class. LJ Martin, a running back right now at BYU, also an underrated kid, I think. Johnny Frazier. And then two more 2024 guys I can throw in here. Adam Muhammad, running back from Washington, and Jonah Cardenas, the running back from Vanderbilt. Now, again, all that's to say is like nothing's guaranteed in this game at all that we love to play. But I think it shows, hey, if we're going to take a shot on the upside, this is the kind of kid that we want. And so Aneyas Williams, I really do believe everybody needs to start paying attention because he might be Notre Dame's future unknown star when it comes to this great fantasy football game that we're talking about. So again, if you have C2C with waivers at all, I would be making sure I put him on a watch list, or I'd be trying to take him and add him to the end of my rosters. You might just, again, have the next great fantasy asset that we all love to own or talk about. And you can get him for dirt cheap. So I do appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to this and just watch this little video real quick. If you ever have questions, feel free to hit me up. Again, whether it's on Twitter, in the comments, however that might be. I appreciate any support there is out there. I've been really enjoying getting back into this. I'm going to let this be the last episode when it talks about running backs, but if there's someone you like, just let me know. I can hit them up later. I think it's time that we move over and I start showing you a different model. I haven't decided if I'm going to do quarterbacks, receivers, or tight ends next, but just be on the lookout. Until then, again, make sure you're checking those stats, you're watching the film, and hopefully together we can help find those future NFL legends. Have a good one.